Hello, good morning. Welcome to the Bible in Plain Sight. My name is Carol Evans. I am so excited to bring you this adoption story this morning with a sweet friend who we met several years ago, and our boys were in the same pre-K class. God bless Mrs. Jones for all of the boys that she had that year. She had quite a full year. So I got to meet one of these moms. Actually, I met her first through Lynn, whose adoption story was last week. I got to meet her through Lynn. We were at the same place at the same time. And so, hey, Sarah, she just joined. Okay, perfect. I'm going to just add you here. Okay. You should see that notification pop up, Sarah.
Oh, you like that? Let's see. Nice picture, right?
Good morning.
Good morning. I just made my coffee, so.
I know. I've got mine too. Okay.
Yes.
We need coffee.
Yes.
Okay, so I know you through Miss Jones's pre-K class when Jackson and Judah and Hayden were all three together, and usually all three in trouble together. And so, anyway, God love their little hearts. So they're growing up though, and now we're getting ready to go into second grade,
Yes. Oh,
which is
yeah.
kind of amazing.
Those
So.
teachers. Yes. Yeah.
God bless their hearts. Yeah. I can barely handle helping with lunch, and then I can't do it for any
I
longer.
yeah. I really thought I wanted to be a teacher at one time in my life, and I'm like, oh, okay, Lord, now I see that
Yeah.
was not.
Now I see that closed door was for everyone,
Yes.
including me.
Yes,
Yes.
exactly. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I know that Judah is adopted, but I don't know his story. And so I really would love for you to share just as far back as you want to go or wherever you want to start with how did you guys come to the decision to adopt? What led you to Judah and his story? So I'll just let you take it away.
Okay. It's funny. As I was thinking through, around this time every year, I like to reflect about our adoption story because it started in April in, probably, well, 8 years ago, we were in the thick of it, right now. And so it was, cause he was born in July. And so I like to think through, and the painful things are much like labor, are like, well, they weren't that bad, and God just has a way of doing that with our hearts and with our minds, and so I'm really thankful for that. But it, Martin and I. And my husband, we've been married for, I was trying to think, this is so terrible. Once you get past a certain year, it's like, I think like it's between 20 and 25 years. I think we're coming up on 22 years. I think that's how it is. So, so we met in Bible school and up in upstate New York at Word of Life Bible Institute. And we were both like older students. We were in our 20s, which was, so old to back then, but, in our early 20s, and we were older students, and we met, we just get along really well. Like that, we were very compatible. That was something that we were, that we always laugh about, because they would have, you took like the compatibility test online that they had, and we would all sit there, and he and I were just friends, and like I think we got like a 99.4 compatibility. I mean, it was something ridiculous. Yeah. And everyone's like, hello, and we're like, whatever. So anyways, a year later we're married. So, so we got married. We moved to Southern New Jersey, right after marriage. I decided not to work full time because, I wanted to be a mom. So I was like, let's not get dependent on my income. So, so for several years, I worked at like part-time substituting at schools, which was crazy in New Jersey. And then I did bookkeeping, which don't ever let me do bookkeeping, people. Like this poor church, because I mean, being a pastor's daughter. Yeah, pastor's daughter, you know,
right.
yes.
I do.
Yeah, so we need like a support group for us, but it's like, okay. But you know, I mean, church was just comfortable for me. So it was like, all right. So I worked there part-time, and Martin was just working in business. He early in our marriage, he decided to become a police officer. It was something that and I don't know if I've ever told you the story, but I'm shortening it very much because it's just a long story in itself. But he decided that he wanted to become a police officer. He's wanted to be one his whole life. So he took the test and joined. And so he was in training. He was doing some training. He was a sheriff's officer. And it was a hot day, but it was also raining, and they were doing a lot of physical activity, and he had a heat stroke.
Wow.
They didn't know what it was at the time. You know, they didn't know he had stopped sweating because it was raining. And so all of the signs, so when he passed out, like he was just, I mean, they didn't know what was going on. So got to the hospital, and his internal body temperature was so hot that by the time I got there, they told me that his muscles had melted and that all of his organs had shut down except for his brain.
Oh my word, Sarah.
Yeah. And so it was like, what? You know, I mean, you're like 25 and it's like, what's going on? And so they
wow.
So his body temperature was 109.7, his internal body temperature. And so, so, you know, I mean, they didn't think he was going to live through the night. I think God just really shielded me from a lot. They put me in this room. I call it the death room, but I think every hospital kind of has it where it's like you can call anyone in the US, and it didn't have cell reception. You had to call people, which was hard. My parents were out of state. On like doing missions, thankfully in the country, but like in Idaho or something.
Yeah.
So it was it was a lot. So anyways, he made, like, end of story, he made an almost full recovery. He was on dialysis for months. He was in a coma, then he was on dialysis for months, and it all came to where they were just like, we just don't think that it's a good idea that you go back into this, because we don't know exactly why. You know, all of this seemed to happen. So he, you know, he kind of lost his dream that day. And he ended up going and getting his MBA, his Master's of Business Administration, after that. And our lives just kind of pivoted. We just pivoted a little, and it was like, okay, so I think that's maybe the first big time that, like, God took our lives, that we were just, you know, going straight, doing everything right. You know, I mean, we were involved in our church, and we were working with our youth group and all of these things, and walked out on faith on this, because, I mean, Martin took it was a huge pay cut. It was a huge leap of faith, all of those things. And we know that we made the right choice, and God, because it happened, and God steered us a different way, and he really showed off. God showed off. I'm just like, I think we forget often how, you know, God demands our glory, but he, like, you know, he delights in that glory, and we should be delighting and giving him that glory. And so watching that whole story happen. So we were told, you know, we don't know what's going to happen with you guys, like, you know, with things. And so that was always kind of in the back of our mind. So fast forward, he gets his master's degree. We moved a little bit north, not a lot, like just to a couple of towns north of where we had been living, and where he was getting his master's degree at Rowan University. And we started trying for children. It was like, okay, it's time. And so, and nothing was happening. So, I I don't know. I don't know why. I mean, it was hard, obviously.
Yeah.
I mean, if any woman who has, has tried for a baby, you're taking the pregnancy test every month, and then you're wondering like, well, like maybe is something wrong? I don't know. But as we talked to each other, I talked to my brother, he's a physician, and, I just said to him, I said, I'm a little nervous about going down the fertility route. Like,
Yeah.
because I've just watched people do it, and it becomes consuming.
Yeah.
I mean, you have to. I mean, you have to. You're taking temperatures, and you're taking these drugs, and you're checking, and there's shots, and I'm a big picture person, and so I'm like, what does the end look like? And it was like, I don't know. And so Martin and I talked things through, and my brother was just like, I'm going to be honest. They could do a lot of tests on both of you. They could do all of these things, and they could come back and say, we don't know. And he was like, it's kind of hard and frustrating that way. And I was like, okay. So we just, during this time took time to pray about it. And I just, I just told my husband, I said, I just don't feel comfortable doing in vitro fertilization. There's nothing wrong with it in the sense of, I mean, it's what a lot of people do to get pregnant, but I just said, I just don't want to do that. And so, which he was like, okay, like, I mean, he was completely fine with that. So I said, what are your thoughts on like us adopting? And as idealistic college students, we had talked about adopting and like blending our family. I mean, it's funny because it's like, what Bible student hasn't talked about that with their
adoption? I know.
Yes. And so I mean, you just do that because you're like, yes, we can do this. And I think it was wonderful, but now it's a reality for us, and we're like, okay, so we talked through and we prayed, and of course I investigated and, was looking and stuff. And I just went to him with kind of the pros and cons list and was like, here are our two options. We can go international, or we can go domestic in the US. So we talked through them, and just selfishly, I did not want to deal with a birth mother. And I know that sounds terrible. Like when you say it out loud, it's like, oh, clutch your pearls. But, but it was like, I didn't want to, I know that adoption is this tragic beauty, and I don't know how else to explain it, but it's this beautiful, tragic thing. And so I just was like, I want to protect my heart a little bit. And my husband always says, however long it takes you to get to a conclusion, you have to understand it's going to take me like twice as long. So, just keep that in mind for what I'm about to say. But, so we were talking through all this, and, and he's just like, okay, so we'll do international. Okay. And so then I'm like, and I have found that if we do a sibling group, it can be faster. And so he's like, what? Like an insta family? Like it's like literally an insta family.
Yes.
And so, and so I was like, yeah, I said, then we're done. Like, and we get to have this group of children all together. How exciting. Like, I don't know. I just thought it was.
I feel like Dave and I have these exact same conversations with different things. And he's like, where did all these huge ideas come from?
Yeah.
And in my mind, I've already like thought through it. I've been thinking about it for months, and it takes him a while. Yeah.
Yes. And I mean, and I know our brains work the same. And so it's like, in which I think our husbands are very similar. I don't know. I don't know if they meet, if they'll be like this or like this, but
we need to get them together for a play date so they can actually meet. Because we think they're going to be great friends together, but they don't know each other yet. So I think they're going to be great.
Goodness, those poor people, our poor husbands. So we chose Ethiopia. That was like the most open, it was all like very practical. And, it was funny. I talked to some of my friends who are Black, and I was like, listen, like I'm about to have these children who, I'm going to need you guys to help me with this, because different cultures and different and all this stuff. And, my my sweet friend was like, I will come up and to New Jersey, and I'm going to help you. Like, and we are going to learn I'm going to teach you all
that's
these things.
awesome.
It was just like this sweet time of like learning and just excitement. So you have to do, adoption is expensive, as most people know, but it's not like here's $30,000 and then they hand you a baby. It's 5,000 here, 10,000 here, 8,000 here, 2,000 here. And so we the first thing we had to do was get a home study, and we met an amazing Christian woman who helped us with her home study, and we just loved her. And she, she walked us through things, and it was like, okay, so we finished the home study, which took too long for everyone. Everyone, including and it was my fault. Like, I was so like, I don't know, I was drudging through, and I'm just not great unless I have clear deadlines. And so, so those were kind of where I was, where it was just taking, everyone's like, why are you guys not finished yet? So I remember sitting in Sunday school. I remember a Sunday morning, I woke up, and I think it was like on the front page of or on the front of my, news app or something. And it was talking about how Ethiopia had shut down their adoption. And we had been watching different countries do it. Like it had, we had seen that, but it was like, okay. And so then we were like, they shut that down. And we were devastated. We went to Sunday school that morning and just cried. And, it was like, you wonder, you're just like, God, why? Like, why did you let this happen? Yeah. And so a verse that I really think that just has walked me through a lot of this is Psalm 84:11. The Lord gives grace and glory, but no good thing does he withhold from those who walk uprightly. Mm-hmm. So I was like, okay, no good thing does he withhold. And so, so if I'm obeying God and I'm walking in, I'm walking in the Spirit, I'm doing, I'm walking in that obedience, there's nothing that's not good that he's not going to give me. So it was like, suddenly my view of good had to twist, because good to me was me getting pregnant, and just that was just easy, and and free. It's like a free puppy, obviously. Right. Yes, it's free, but then you got to pay for everything. But but it was a lot cheaper, and so all of the things were good to me. But it was like, wait, he's giving me something that's good, so that means that my infertility right now is good, and the door being closed to Ethiopia was good. And so, it made me shift and be like, okay, he's God, I'm not, and I need to be okay with all of this. And so, and I say it like it was easy. It wasn't, of course, it wasn't easy. And it's still not easy, but, so that was really hard for us. So we just took a step back, and we're like, okay, let's see what we're going to do. And it was a lot. It was a crazy few years after that. Yeah. We moved to New York City. We lived there for a couple of years. We moved back down to South Jersey. And during that time, God just kind of started shaping our hearts towards domestic adoption. And it was like, okay, what is this looking like? So yes. And, and the books that I'd read, the things I'd researched, of course, I'd researched everything, was, that the open adoptions are beautiful and they're wonderful. But, so I walked through and just was like, okay, Lord, I need to trust you on this. So, so I talked to Martin about it, and he was like, what? And so I was like, let's just go to it, just an inquiry, meeting. Let's do that. So we went, and it was, it was it was just one of those moments that as we're talking, Martin's like, yeah, this is what we need to do. And I'm like, okay, let's do it.
Wow.
And so we jumped in and we were like, all right, this was about 2015. And the end of 2015, we had just gotten back from Israel with my work, and we were like, oh, we've done so much traveling, we've done mission trips, we've done all this stuff, like this is, and I remember in January of 2016, Martin and I bought a crib and we put it together, and we had a 4-bedroom house and we put it in the baby's room that we always called it. And he just prayed over it. And I was just like, wow, okay. I mean, he's never done something like that. I mean, it was like not something that
So, Sarah, let me ask a question.
Yeah.
How long from the time you guys had started to try to have children until you put the crib together? Like, how long was that journey for you guys?
Like almost 14 years.
Yeah.
Like I really condensed it. Like
That's what,
actually,
when you were looking at
that.
the timeline, that's what I thought. But
yeah,
when you're telling a story in a few minutes, like that's a long time.
Yes, and
that's a really long time.
Maybe I'll say 10 years because, for 4 years, it wasn't like we were actively trying, and so I'll even say 10 years. Yeah. Like we were in that, although we would have been happy to get pregnant before then, sure. But it was just not something that, but yeah, so, you hear it on this side and it's like, oh, well, it seems so easy for you, or I'm sure that was hard, but yeah, 10 years, that was, it was a long time. And I'm so thankful. Like we had such a full marriage during that time. Like God really blessed that time with us that we were able to do things that the empty nesters have to do. Like, you got to wait till you're an empty nester to do. And we got to, that was something that we were able to do. And so that was in, so that was in January. And so we saved up our money and we sent like $3,000 to this adoption agency that we decided to do. And, and we sent it with the initial paperwork and everything. Our home study was no longer valid. So we were going to have to get a new home study. So that was like a thing. And, cause they were, I think, $5,000. And so we decided, we were like, all right, we're going to do this. So it was probably March, it was March that we did this. I put it in the mail. I remember going to work, and I will say this too, in 2000, I don't know what year it was, but when it was, we had been married 5 years, and that's when we kind of were like, okay, like this doesn't look like it's going to happen easily, at least. And so I was offered a position at the Friends of Israel Gospel Ministry in southern New Jersey, outside of Philadelphia. And it was a full-time position, my first full-time job, like being married. And we talked about it, and we just felt like it was the right thing to do. And so I had started working for them, and had moved up into a position that I was really, really happy and just very happy and satisfied there. And that's when I really started like reading some Elizabeth Elliot. I really identified with her. She, this woman who came from a lot of children, like her home was full of a lot of brothers and sisters, like mine was. And that, she goes into full-time missions, and her husband dies like within, the few months of her daughter being born. And suddenly she's a widow with a daughter. And she's single. And so this whole thing, like, again, she sees something, and it's like her life is going this way, and God moves it. And so I just really started kind of identifying with her and being like, okay, I can see that, that God's doing something different, like, and I need to be open. I mean, we need to be walking with our hands open, obviously, to God, but there were some times that I had to physically open my hands and be like, okay, Lord, like, I don't know what you're doing in this. So, it's like, okay. So I sent off the check to the adoption agency. And the next day, a good friend of mine and my husband's, emails and or messages me, and she's just like, "Hey, I know you guys are looking to adopt, but she said, but I think you're doing international." She said, but I was curious because my dad, who he was a pastor, there's a woman at her church that is looking to place her child for adoption, and it was like,
right.
oh, okay. So we had been approached before about things like this, and they had fallen through. But
Yeah.
Martin and I both would always say, we'd kind of put the burden on the other person and be like, listen, we're here, like we're open to whatever God wants. So, you just let us know. So she, so that was March. I wrote her back and said, yeah, like we actually just sent an email out yesterday.
Yeah.
or a checkout yesterday.
Yeah.
To an adoption agency. We're like open for domestic. So, and I love how God just worked on our hearts and changed us during that time.
Years.
Yeah. To do domestic adoption. And so, she was like, all right, I'll let my family know. And she goes, I don't know if it's going to be anything.
Yeah.
And I was like, yeah, that's fine. Like, it's fine. So, but I thought it was curious. I think that's the best word. It was like, I just sent that adoption checkout yesterday, and this is interesting. Yeah. So they got a hold of us again and said, this woman would like to meet you. And we just were kind of like, oh, wow. Okay. This like, we've never actually met someone before that like. So we went to the church on a Sunday after service, and we met her. She was single, had multiple children from multiple men, but really just found herself alone and started walking to this church.
Wow.
And so her and her children walking to the church, and the church was helping her in a lot of ways. Like they were really stepping in and doing it wisely. Like they had, she needed some legal help, and they were, helping her with a lawyer and different things. Yeah. And so it was just really beautiful watching them, walk along with her. And this was probably 45 minutes from where we lived. And so, it was, we met her. She was very reserved. And she just told us that she wanted to have an abortion, but that she didn't have the $400 to have one. And she said, I just started thinking, and she didn't even really understand the concept of adoption until one of the pastor's daughters had adopted, and she saw she saw that whole process in front of her happening. And so she was like, do you want my baby? And which she was like, no, I have a baby. Like, I cannot take your baby. And so, but then it was like, but we may have someone who does. And so, after we met her, like, she talked through, and she said that that some of his tests had come back abnormal, and that, they weren't sure like what it could be, and, but it could be nothing. And, she's just saying all of this, and Martin and I are just kind of taking it in. And Martin asked her, he said, what do you, like, what kind of relationship are you looking for, like, with us? And she said, I just really want him, she knew it was a boy. I want him to know that, that I did this because I love him, and I wanted to give him a chance. And it was like, oh, okay, like, that's it, and it was like, okay. So we went home that Monday. I called that adoption agency, and she didn't want to go through a agency, which gave me a little pause. But again, it's like, you're just walking, like, Martin and I talked about it, and I remember sitting in the living room crying with him, because we were talking through, and we're like, this baby, like, she named all the things that this baby could have Down syndrome. This baby could have, like, severe mental disabilities, like all of these things that it could have, that's because they wanted her to do like a genetic
test or something.
Like getting like it's so funny. All the words have left me, but like sticking that big needle in there and like doing the amniotic fluid testing and stuff. And she was like, yeah, no, I'm not going to do that. She was like, no, that sounds too risky. And Martin and I had to walk into that and just say, God brought us here. We obviously out of nowhere. So we both just said, we don't know, if this child was inside of me, we have no control over those. Right. So it was like, again, we've got to walk with our hands open and just to see. And so, so we jumped in. I called the agency and was like, yo, can you cancel that $3,000 check? Cause we need it. And so they were like, yes, we will, like, don't worry. And so, and they were so sweet and supportive, like, let us know if you need help. And so we just started walking through this. And, I told Martin, I said, cause you have like the Job's friends who are like, this happened to one of my friends and they spent thousands of dollars and the birth mother kept the baby. And so as we were walking through, we just said, like, this is God's baby and he knows who is going to raise this boy. And if this is not our baby, then we don't want him. And if we can help this woman for just a few months, and her family and feed them well, I was able to take her shopping and do different things like to, just to physically provide for her. And I said, then so be it. So, it was a scary time. She just, a good friend of mine said to me, there's no one is in a perfectly good, healthy spot and is like, I want to, place my baby for adoption, right? And so she was like, there's going to be issues there that, are going to be. And it was like,
some deep water.
Yeah. And so we had these two lives going on. So she had some medical issues that, she didn't have a car, like I said. So I was taking her to her appointments and she had some medical issues that I was, that they had to do a stress test on the baby every week and an ultrasound. So I got to see him like every week and hear his heartbeat and, and take those pictures home. And it was so, it was just it was so sweet of God to
from the very beginning.
Yeah. Wow. Just to, to have that. And so we had, but I was living like a double life. And I say that in not in a malicious kind of way, but I was dealing with this woman and her family and her health and taking care of her. And she had started depending on me like emotionally, and I could tell we were trying to put up some healthy borders with her. But I was also in this moment where dear friends were throwing me baby showers and, and I was doing all of these great things and, these exciting things and, knowing at any minute that she could change her mind, that, anything could happen.
Nothing had been documented yet.
No. And you can't document, because it literally, and, God chose for us to go this way. And, a lot of, I was talking to some people on a trip I was on, last week and, and they said, we didn't know that the baby was born until 2 days later and, and just handed the baby. And I'm like, that's great. I would have preferred that, but then I would, I would have missed like that time that I got to see him in the womb. And, she, just having her, I would always play sometimes the same, songs, on just because I thought, okay, I want him to hear these songs and, and then I'll play them, outside the womb and he'll, feel comfortable with those. And there were just little things that I would try to be intentional about and just praying over her and different things. And so it was in a month before the adoption, everything kind of changed. A man came into her life that she met, and I could just tell things were different. And I couldn't put my finger on it. And of course, I probably just wouldn't let my mind go to drugs.
Yeah.
Like I just wouldn't let it get there. And, you know, and it's like love believes all things. And so you're trying not to be cynical and all of these, you know, but also be cautious. And, and, you know, it was just difficult. It was really difficult during those about 4 or 5 weeks that he was in the picture. But again, God was working in that. Because, you know, she would have been all alone after the baby was born. And so and now she wasn't. I mean, so I was trying to look, and, you know, I mean, this guy was no good, but it was like, okay.
Yeah.
But I started putting even more boundaries up, and just giving her gift cards and that saying, you've got to get to the grocery store. I'm not going to be able to. And, you know, the last month there's tons of appointments anyways, but then to have to be high risk, like, it's like, oh my goodness, you're just
there all the time.
Doctor.
Yeah.
All the time. So we, so all this to say, we made it through. We made it through those few weeks, and they inducted her for the beginning of July. And that weekend, because I knew what her kids liked, because I'd been buying them food for months. Yeah. I knew what her kids liked. And so the day before, Martin and I, we were making all of her kids' favorite food because she wasn't going to be there. And we were making all of their food. We were making it, you know, in microwavable like things so they could just stick them in. We did this huge bag. And I'll say this too. We did like a GoFundMe type of page where people could give. And how God gave to us was just gave through people to bless us for this adoption was unbelievable. And it's not the people that you're like, oh, they're going to give us a lot of money. It wasn't. It was the most unassuming people, widows, children. This one family, she texted me, the birth mother texted me one day and just said, my toilet stopped up in my house, and like like stuff's coming up over it. I don't know what to do.
Oh, no.
And they only had one bathroom in their house, and I called plumbers, and I couldn't, you know, it was like, I don't know, 11 o'clock in the afternoon. No one could go out that day. And I finally get this guy, and his name is Spike. I'll never forget. His name was Spike, and you know, Spike the plumber. And I'm talking to him, and he's like, and I'm like, Spike, like, she's pregnant, and they have one bathroom, and like there's poop coming up out of her toilet.
Bad.
Yeah. And he's like, ugh. And I said, and we're adopting this baby. I said, and I'm going to pay for it. And he was like, oh man, you know, I mean, like tugging on all the heartstrings, I guess. And so, you know, he's like, all right, I'm sending somebody out there. So, you know, he's like, what price do you want me to call you? Like, you know, what can I work for?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I prayed about it, just a split second. It was like $1,000. And at this point, we did not have $1,000. I mean, we had used all of our savings, because you have to buy, or you don't, you have to hire lawyers for her and us to protect her and to protect us. And, and there's all, you know, you're doing your home study and just all of these things. And so, yes. And so, you know, I mean, we are like tapped out at this point. And he called that night, and he said, listen, we're not going to be able to get to it until tomorrow. He said, but we unclogged it for now, but it's going to happen. He said, it's like in her septic system. He said, I've got to get a backhoe out there and do it. And he was like, again, I'll call you if it gets over 1,000. And I was like, okay.
A backhoe is like over it. Like, that's just, they say the word, and that means like really big money.
Yes. And I was like, okay. So that afternoon he called me and he's like, we fixed it. And I was like, thank you so much. And I'm like, how much do I owe you? And he was like, $995. And I was like, Spike, are you serious? Like, amazing. And so, I'm crying and, I'm getting text messages from her like, this is amazing. I can't believe this. And so, I told Martin, I was like, all right, we'll figure it out. Like, we'll figure out how to pay for it. Like, it's fine. And so, so that night I got home and in my mailbox was a check from a friend. And it's a family that we've known for years. And I just opened it up and it just said, we hope that you can use this for something with your adoption. And it was $1,000 like that night. And I just thought, God, you are so good. Like, you just care about poop. Like, it's like amazing how he just cared for us during that time. So there was this hope that we were going to see this through, but there was a promise that no matter what, God was going to be with us. We had no promise that this baby was going to, become ours, but, and it's easy on this side of it to be like, well, but he did. And it's like, yeah, but we didn't know that. Yeah. And, so the day came that Judah was born, and it was raining like crazy. And we took her and her boyfriend and to the doctor to the hospital to get induced. And just a friend of mine had said, Sarah, if this is supposed to happen, you're going to see God manipulate situations like never before. And I was like, okay. And so she wanted all of us in one room together, like after he was born. And it was like, oh my goodness, this is going to be so hard. Somewhere in the midst of that day, she asked to talk to the nurse privately and told the nurse that she felt really bad and that I would probably be really upset, but she didn't want me and the baby in the room with her after the baby was born. And it was like, what? Like, okay. And so that was amazing. Like, that she was able to, that God gave her the strength to verbalize that. And that nurse said, okay. But in the midst of all of this, nurse shift changes, all of those things. And the next group of nurses, after Judah was born, she held him for a little bit, and then she asked to go to the recovery room. And Martin and I were left in the room with Judah. And so we're in this empty delivery room, blood everywhere. She lost a lot of blood. And, holding this sweet baby who was shaking a lot when he came out, and we didn't understand why. So we're holding him, and he's just perfect. He's just so sweet. And we could hear the nurses arguing out at the nurses station. And they were like, we don't owe that family a room. They need to go home, and that baby needs to be with their mother. And so then the other nurse said, well, it says here in her chart that she doesn't want the baby in the room with her. And then you heard the other one say, well, and we obviously know the baby's on something, so he's probably going to be on NICU, like he's going to go to the NICU soon. So it was like all of these things that were like, okay. And we just sat there and prayed, and they walked in. We didn't hear what happened, but this woman walked in and said, hi, So they said, hi, we're going to take you guys down to the pediatric ward. It's several floors down on the other side of the hospital. And we're going to have you guys stay there. And we were like, oh, okay. So off we went, and I got to spend the first night in the hospital with this squirmy little dinosaur noise-making baby, and was told that, they tested him and everything, and was told that he had some narcotics inside of him, but that it looked like he could possibly wean himself off without going to the NICU. So they said, if you could keep the lights low and swaddle him really well and hold him, we'll see how it goes. And it was like, oh, I'm sorry, you want me just to hold my baby? Okay, like no problem. So for 5 days, that is what we got to do in the peds department. She left. She checked herself out to be with her other children. She came back once. We paid for her to come back once to get a final check. You're allowed to give one in New Jersey. You're allowed to give one postpartum check. So we gave her this fairly large check that the lawyer suggested for her expenses for the next month, and that was the last time that we saw her.
Wow.
And it wasn't the last time we heard from her. There's other things that I'm leaving out because they're Judah's story, and
Yeah.
and I'm going to hold them until he's ready to hold them. But God was there, and Judah. It took forever for us for adopt. She could have come back at any time and said, I've changed my mind.
Yeah.
From July to November, she could have done this when
Sarah.
her rights her rights were terminated in November, and
Wow.
and then the adoption process happened in June. So she could have petitioned from November to June if she wanted to, but a lot of things happened, and there were not good choices made on that part. But we always just said to the parents, or to the pastor, like, if she ever comes back and has made good decisions, we'd love to see her. And so we've set updates to the lawyer. We don't think anything has happened with them, but that. But to fast forward until now, like Judah knows that he's adopted. We pray every night for his birth family. The realization of a birth mother is much bigger than a birth father for a 7-year-old, as just because of reproduction. Yeah. So we've had a lot of good conversations with him as he is walking through that we are, that he's going to be, that God chose him to be in our family, that his birth mother placed him in our family. But that bigger than that, God did it. Elizabeth Elliot just said something, and she just, one thing I am perfectly sure, God's story never ends with ashes. And so, I just think even if this had fallen through, even if all of those things, like God was going to use them. And we do have a happy ending. I mean, Judah is actively praying for a baby sister. I don't think that's going to happen. I'm like, listen, I think like we are very happy right now in just the three of us. But if that, God has other plans, that's fine. But it just, it's just a true testament of him. So I obviously left a lot out, but we don't have 6 hours to sit here.
Oh man, Sarah, thank you so much for sharing that and all of the ups and downs of that 14-year journey. I cannot even imagine. And the prayers and the tears, and you and Martin just working through that together. Because I think a lot of couples, that's hard to go through all those emotions. As a woman, you're feeling one way. As a man, he's feeling one way. And that is so hard to stay connected together and to work together and to just pray through it and connect through it instead of let it divide you. And so thank you for sharing that. If you wouldn't mind, just kind of, I know there's a lot of people that are praying about adoption and that are considering it. And there's so many options when you are trying to have a baby. You, just like you talked about, you can do kind of the in vitro route, you can do domestic adoptions, you can do foreign adoptions. There's so many options. And so if you would today just close us out in prayer for those families that are considering what the best option is for them and the way that God is leading them It might be different than the way he led you, but just knowing how he led you and seeing his hand
Yeah.
over that 14-year journey, even in the waiting, even when you weren't actively trying, your faith was getting deeper, and you and Martin were still connecting, and you guys, just like you talked about, you had a great marriage during that waiting season,
Yeah.
and you lived your life. You didn't live your life on hold, you lived your life. And I love that. So if you would mind, just close us out in a prayer, for those families that are considering what their next part of their journey will be.
Yeah. Let's pray. Father, thank you. Just thank you so much for, first of all, for your sovereignty, for being in control, and Lord, and not having surprises, and not just wanting to orchestrate all of this, not just for our good, Father, but ultimately for your good. And Lord, I pray as we think of these women and men who are walking through this, Lord, I pray that that you will help them to, first of all, just walk in obedience to you, Father. Just do the next thing, whatever that is, to walk in obedience with you, and to just, Father, just give them a desire for your word, that they've just never had before, and that they can get just really lost in you, and not, and as they exchange those feelings and those thoughts, Father, that they exchange them for truth that you're feeling with them. Lord, we know that you are in control of our wounds, of our wombs. And you open them, Father, you've opened them, you've closed them. We see that in your word over and over again. And Lord, I just think how you have allowed old ladies to get pregnant because that was your will. And Father, I pray that for these women, if that is your will. But Father, I pray that you will just help them, and you may have to pry their hands open, but that you will pry, that their hands will be open, Father, to what you want, and that you'll soften their heart, and that you will help them, even if their husbands aren't on board, that you will just give them a heart and a desire to pray for their husbands through this, that they'll be on the same page, and that you'll convict them of manipulation if they're trying to manipulate the situation, but that you will just help them in the waiting, Father, because that's when we grow, and we know that that it is, and that that you will get all the glory. And if not, Father, I pray that you will help all of us just to have a purpose that's bigger than motherhood, that's bigger than being a wife, Father, but that we will just be women after you, and just chasing after you, Father. So I just lift all of these things up, and I can only do that because of what your son Jesus did for us on the cross, and it's in his name that we pray. Amen.
Amen. Sarah, thank you so much. That was beautiful. Thank you for your story. And we need to get our husbands together for that play date soon so they can get to know each other.
Yes, yes, because the boys we know
The
are
boys are
fine, but the men,
great.
yes,
Yeah, the
yes.
boys are great. Yeah, awesome. Okay. Well, thank you so much, Sarah. I love
Thank,
you and love your
thank
family.
you. Love
And we'll
you, and
see you
thank you for
soon.
having me.
Bye.
All right,
Thank you.
bye.